I have a short presentation, ladies and gentlemen. I only have 5 slides. Those 5 slides have no text on them. They are only images. We are a text-heavy country. Everybody has many things to say and often says them. I am a writer. I write voluminously. Some people would say too many books. So therefore, I thought this time I will let the images speak for themselves. My presentation is on the promise of India in a VUCA world. Lots of people asked me outside for tea, what is VUCA? VUCA is a standard management term, and now that I have to deal with many people who are from management, I thought let me use that terminology. It stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. It should be obvious to everyone why we are in a VUCA world, because that's really the world we are in. Because this sentence itself is complicated, I thought I will shorten it to 5 images you have to see about India. And this is image number 1. And lo behold, I don't know how to operate this. Third one? Okay, excellent. Wonderful. All right, let's make this interactive, ladies and gentlemen. What is this? It's the Dal Lake. Why is this image here? What's the importance? Why should we talk about this image at all? It is the Dal Lake, but houseboat, local handicraft. As always, quite like me, it's the people who sit right at the back, which is where I usually was to be found in school and college. They have the right answer. It is because of the QR code, ladies and gentlemen. That's right. There. Can you see that? That's the thing. That's what it is. So I want to begin with this image. The Dal, and I was noting how big the Dal is. I think it's 316 square kilometers. The Dal is 316 square kilometers. It is full of houseboats and shikaras like this. It's full of floating markets, and each one of them in Srinagar, in the heart of Kashmir, in the Dal Lake, have a QR code like this. If you want to understand how India is changing, this is a definitive image. All the things you can talk about in terms of national integration, skilling people, providing funds, bank loans, all this is wonderful. Integration happens in small ways, ladies and gentlemen. In small ways. When people start to feel like they belong to a larger community, in this particular case, Kashmiris feeling that they belong to a larger community called India, the signs of that are in small things. We are not a country that understands small things very much. Because everything about us is big. We have large weddings, large this and large that, right? But it's the small things that count. What does this mean? It has greater significance than just the fact that people can pay. It means both the buyer and the seller in this particular case, ladies and gentlemen, the two parties in the transaction are united through a platform called the Unified Payments Interface. I put to you, ladies and gentlemen, that the word unified, so key when we talk about Kashmir, is embedded in that tiny code. That's why it's important. That's why we should talk about it. That's the promise of India. The world is volatile, it is complex, it's uncertain and ambiguous. The promise of India is in the small things. Let's see the next image. Wait. Excellent. We are in this wonderful city. Everybody should know who this is. Who is this? Bhavesh Agarwal. Why is this image important, ladies and gentlemen? All women factory. Excellent. The first row has also woken up. It is indeed an all women factory. 10,000 women. Thought we were in Bangalore, so should bring in some Bengaluru elements. That's, of course, Bhavesh Agarwal of Ola. Those are the women who run one of the world's largest EV factories, EV scooters. They make electric vehicles, scooters in this case, and they're all women. Now, how are these women here? There's a backstory to this, and we did the numbers on this. I could have shown you 9 graphs and charts, but I didn't want to bore you, so let me tell you the story. Shamika Ravi is here, so it's particularly pertinent. Shamika Ravi and her husband Mudit Kapoor talk about the silent woman voter. Many of you might know that in Indian democracy, more women are voting than ever before. Now, the natural question for somebody like me when I read that was, but why? But why? And remember, we consistently talk about lack of female participation in the labor force, right? Now, I don't deny that that is a problem, but we may be looking at it through lenses which is skewing some of the analysis. We'll come to that in just a second. When I read that about the silent voters and all these women coming to vote, we began to ask the question, how are these women doing this? Why were so many women not coming to vote all these years and it's happening now? And we found 9 parameters. 9 parameters. And, my colleague and I wrote a long Sunday Guardian article about this. See, this is why learning and training as a communicator. I know NewsX is one of the partners. I have quickly now swung in Sunday Guardian also, This is the brand building that I learned early in life. But anyway, so we wrote this long piece where we showed that in the last 8 years, a whole bunch of policies have been geared to empower women to participate more deeply in democracy. What are these policies? For instance, I was recently in Leh. Do you know one of the great successes of Leh is the Jal Jeevan mission? At minus 45 to 55 degrees also, pipelines are carrying tapped water to the homes of Ladakh. Right? And Ladakh is just one example. It's happening across India. Water, if you remember, many of you might remember, the old image of India, one of the old images of art films of India were women carrying water. And there would always be this lovely song, to take away from the agony of the lives of these women, and everybody would hum the tunes. But those women would be carrying water on their head for kilometers on end. Water was really important. And we really believe that the biggest, and we argue this in this article, the biggest benefit that public policy can give to women is not a job, is not empowerment, is not anything else. It is time. Because if you really want to understand where the gap is, it is time. Men have more time than women. If you look at it across, research shows us the biggest problem. Virginia Woolf wrote that wonderful thing called a sort of room of one's own, right? What was she trying to say? Time and space. So water. Wood, the move away from wood-powered stoves to gas. The exponential rise in menstruation health. Right? And there are 9 such parameters through which we showed that one of the biggest transformation as far as gender is concerned is not the debates you see on Twitter, ladies and gentlemen. It is that Indian women, at an average, perhaps through public policy, have more time. That's the big difference. And that difference also reflected in this image. Right? An empowerment of democracy, of labor force, and at a broad sense of society. Let's move to the next image. Peak Bangalore. 2 images actually here. Why is this image important, ladies and gentlemen? The one in the corner. Do you know why this is important? We'll come to that part in a minute. Why is this important? Okay, Swiggy and Zomato are both there. What else? All right. Okay, because Swiggy and Zomato, you have identified both, right? Right? Okay. This is also a startup, ladies and gentlemen. Vogo. Right? But that's not all. This is also a startup. This image, you want to understand how startups are changing India? This image proves it. This is that image. And I put this image here and I was wondering what to put alongside it. And of course I thought, this is peak Bangalore. Of course it's peak Bangalore. It's peak Bengaluru. So I put another image from peak Bengaluru of somebody texting that he ordered coffee on Swiggy from CCD, which is Cafe Coffee Day. The delivery guy picked it up, but was too lazy to come and deliver it here, so he dunzoed it to me. I got a call from him saying, Bhaiya, maine dunzo kar diya hai, please 5-star rating de dena. If you want to understand how things are changing, we always talk about this, and we used to say this in journalism, and we say it in Invest India also. All our conversations are at 25,000 feet. All conversations in India at 25,000 feet, because we are great gyan givers as people, right? We love giving these broad, elaborate gyans. And that's fine. That's fine. But it has to come down to the bottom. What is the manifestation? What's the implementation? What's the real change on the ground? This is the real change on the ground. This is why startups matter. Now, you may argue that some unicorns will fail and some will not succeed and some actually don't have the right valuation. All that is fine. That's part and parcel of an ecosystem growing. It's the mindset that matters. The mindset changes everything. The mindset is critical. That's why, that's the promise. In these two images, ladies and gentlemen, the promise of India. Let's go to the next image.
Every single brand in that has Chinese funding. It's short on a phone with a Chinese brand. All of them are losing money.
That's fine.
What does this have to do with uncertainty?
But that's fine. The fact is, you have to begin somewhere. If you think you're going to begin with perfection, that every investment that comes in is going to be from whatever filter you're using, from day one they will be making money, that's utopia. We'll get there hopefully one day. We may not be there today. We may not be there today, right? You have to begin somewhere. Would you much rather that we don't even begin? Because that's where we were a few years ago. We were in a world where, and I grew up in a city where we were taught this, that society has to be perfect, because the communists taught us that society has to be perfect. And until it becomes perfect, we have to suffer, because, suffering builds character, right? And really, my character got built because I suffered a lot as a child. I just want to tell you, I suffered a lot. So if you feel I have great character, whoever feels that, it's because I suffered. Anyway. All right, let's see the next image. Why is this image important, ladies and gentlemen? Health and wellness yoga. Okay, that's one. What else? Any other reason why this is important? Fusion of cultures, okay? Yeah, sure, absolutely. What else? All right, this is from Australia. This is an Australian person clearly practicing, a yoga practitioner, but not giving up her favorite wine. Why is this important? We just signed a landmark trade agreement called ECTA with Australia, and that's among the many other trade agreements we're signing with various parts of the world. From an India which was suspicious, we are moving to an India which is far more confident. Change is coming in small ways and large, and this series of some free trade agreements, some freer trade agreements will, in a sense, push us forward. And that pushing us forward brings me to my last image. Why is this important? What is this, by the way? It's the Vrindavan Chandrodaya temple. Why is the Vrindavan Chandrodaya temple important? Because it is going to be the world's tallest temple, 700 feet. Now, when I was writing my Sardar Patel book, a lot of people called me to say, well, why should we have this tall statue of Sardar Patel? Is the statue an only way of respecting Sardar Patel? I'm like, but surely it is one more way of respecting Sardar Patel. It may not be the only way. Would you much rather we don't respect at all? Right? Because clearly Sardar Patel was one figure we forgot for many decades to give the Bharat Ratna. Forgot many other people also, I don't want to go into that. So it was one more way. I put this image in for a particular purpose. If you read history, all rising nations, barring none, all rising nations had one thing in common. People say GDP growth, mercantilism, trade, all kinds of things, right? But there's one thing that's common. Rising powers not only have confidence in their culture, they also project confidence. It's not enough to say you have confidence. You must have the ability to project it, right? Projection is important because there is a domestic audience which also needs projection. There's also an international audience which needs projection. So cultural confidence as an ingredient must be projected, must be felt, must be absorbed, and must also be projected. This is important because it represents, among many things, and these are all, you could find, I have 5 slides, each of you could have your own 5 slides about this, or maybe 50. I'm not suggesting at all that this is the final word by any stretch of imagination. But my point is, India's cultural shift from defense to not offense, but at least confidence projection is a very important mental shift. And in a world which is uncertain, in a world where some of the biggest democracies in the world do not know where they stand in the cultural war anymore, if rising powers need to stand on firm cultural ground. In many parts of the world today, the cultural war has come to a point where society has become uncertain about where they stand, about even basic issues. But rising powers cannot have that doubt. That ambiguity is a problem. Rising powers must understand who they are, must know who they are, and also have the ability to explain to their own people and project to the world who they are. That's why, we talk in investment, we talk about how investors need a stable economic system. They need systems that don't get disturbed. They need certainty. That certainty does not only come from economics. I want to argue to you that certainty comes from deeper things than just economics. This is not to say that economics is not important. Economics is very important. Absolutely. Economic policy is very important. But economic policy stands on the bedrock of cultural confidence. As everything, nation building stands on a bedrock of cultural confidence. So nations must understand, absorb, project inwards, and project outwards their cultural confidence. For all the reasons that I mentioned across the 5 slides, my argument is India does represent and will represent in coming years a certain stable state nation, rising nation, in a deeply uncertain and fractured world. Now you may say, well, but actually I think it could be more stable. Sure. There is no final point to these things. Sure. But in the world that we live in today, in the fractures and fissures that we are seeing today, India is in a relatively far more stronger, more confident, more unified, and certainly a more interesting and lucrative prospect in the world. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.